What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
What is up, Ravens flock? Another episode here with 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin and DK in the background. As always, we're excited to get into this video as we continue on this series of the Pro Football Focus rankings of positions, of coaches, things of that nature. So we're going to get into that specifically today when it comes to the head coaches and their ranking and give our feelings on them and things like that, and where John Harbaugh is to them and to us. But before we do, make sure to find us on all your outlets. First and foremost, if you want to support the show, easy way to do it. Hit the subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Newsbreak. And if you want to check out our Patreon material, DK is writing weekly articles that are really great. We try and have a couple posts a week, so check it out. But Glenn, this list came out, I think like 4 days ago or so, maybe 6 days, something like that.
On the 8th.
Right. So 5 days ago. And
Yep.
So I didn't say 5. I said 4 and 6. Great. But John Harbaugh was ranked on this list. Why don't you tell them where they were ranked, and we'll get into our feelings about it.
Yeah. So first of all, they only ranked the top 7 coaches. So this isn't a full 32 where they rank every coach. So if you didn't make the top 7, you didn't make this list. And there's a couple of interesting people on the list, as well as some omissions that I think surprised me and you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll start with number 1 on the list.
There he is, the walrus.
The big fella. Yeah, the big fella. No surprise here, especially with the recent success he's had, and combine that with the longevity of success over his career. No surprise, Andy Reid of the Chiefs comes in at number 1, and deservedly so. I mean, the guy's had a ton of success. Been around for a long, long time, and has one impressive coaching tree underneath of him. So, and our guy right underneath at number 2, John Harbaugh of the Baltimore Ravens, is one of the main members on that coaching tree, or one of the prime members.
Probably his most successful, what do you call it? Predecessor, right? Predecessor? No. One of the most successful branches of the Andy Reid tree, right?
I mean, yeah, there's not a whole lot of more successful coaches in the history of the league than Harbaugh. So, yeah, absolutely, he's up there. And, I'm happy to see that John get that kind of love, that kind of respect. They got him at number 2. I mean, I think if I had to predict where they would have ranked him, I would have hoped for high. But judging by some of the recent rankings for our Ravens, I wouldn't have expected it to be quite this high. Would you think when you saw it?
Yeah, I agree with you, because I feel like based on our comments and like some of the folks, of course, that we talk to and the reaction we get to some of our conversations about John, he's kind of a lightning rod in the Ravens community, at least, but seems to be nationally, not that he's not respected here, but highly touted, right? Before I talk more about John, one of the things I think is funny, Andy Reid, Glenn, have you ever seen Monsters University?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the guy
I've seen Monsters Inc. I don't think I've seen
the second one,
yeah.
Monsters University. There's a character on there that has suction cups on his tentacles, and go look it up. It's Andy Reid in cartoon form.
Okay.
And in fact, he says "son of a mustache," which makes it even better. But so John, about talking about what's important here. I think one of the things that's interesting about this list is a couple things. One, and we'll go further down it, but respect to John in that, like, and DK brought this up before the show. He's really one of the only, non-specialists on the list, in that John is what I would consider the traditional head coach before head coach started, taking over the play calling more, whether it's defensively or offensively. But he is a head coach. He is, a big part of his job is managing his coaching staff. And I think that's more, in some ways, even more difficult, because you have to be able to have a long enough leash on these guys to give them their sphere, but also set the tone, right? You can't just go in and take over a room and say, he can, but that's not his style. That's not what he does. So that, and then it says in here, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, John, getting Joe Flacco to the Super Bowl, and of course Joe played his butt off in that run, but taking a team like that to the Super Bowl with a mix of a young regime along with some Hall of Fame vets, being able to early mesh with both groups with some bumps along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly was telling about him as a coach, and then now to be able to go all in, hit his hand on the desk and say, "I want Lamar Jackson. We're gonna change everything up," and seeing the vision it speaks to John as a coach. And then the last thing I'll say here, Glenn, that are my justifications for liking him at number 2 is his playoff road win victory. Now, some people can say that well, that means his team's on the road a lot in the playoffs, and that's fine, but I think John is really hard to beat in a one game, to the, do or die type situation, sudden death. He's really good at preparing his team and being singular in that focus. And that's why he's so good at opening weeks, after buys, things like that, kind of the same idea. And that's job number 1 for a coach.
And no doubt about it. And just to expand on that playoff record you're talking about, he's 19-14 in his career in the playoffs. So nearly 60% win percentage in the playoffs. You're going to be hard to find another coach that can match that. And that, you accompany that with 60% win percentage in the regular season as well. So that success isn't just in the postseason, of course, but you got to be good in the regular season to get there. So the guy's been incredibly successful. And I think you're right in pointing out that he's not a play caller. And I think that can oftentimes cause, depending on your level of success, cause dissension. It could cause players to they almost look to the coordinator before they look to you. If you're not, a real leader of men like John Harbaugh is, I think that could absolutely start to see guys saying, why isn't the offensive coordinator our head coach? I mean, this guy designed the whole offense. He's leading me and my rest of the offense. So the fact that he still commands the type of respect, doesn't have any of those issues. And really, if you just listen to his assistants talk, listen to Wink Martindale talk about John Harbaugh. I mean, he glowingly speaks of what John has done for him, the team, the atmosphere, and really any veteran that you see come here from other organizations does the same and really talks about the difference in what John Harbaugh's atmosphere is here with the Baltimore Ravens and versus everywhere else. So incredibly successful. So I think deservedly up here, but let me talk about some other guys on the list.
Well, really quickly, let me ask you this, Glenn, before you go to the other guys on the list, what are the knocks that, because I think we're going to get it in the comments section, right? John doesn't do this. John doesn't do that. John should be on the hot seat because of this. What are some of the common things that you hear, and what's your thought when you hear some of the things? Because I kind of addressed a few of them where people talk about, they almost see it as a knock that he's not a play caller, or they say, one of the things I know that gets you fired up, I might be giving you throwing you a softball here, but what does he know about offense, right? What does he know about play calling? And I know that's one of the things that get you fired up, but what are some other things that you hear from, our viewers in the comment section, things that kind of and how do you address those, right, as it knocks against John?
Yeah, well, the big one that I hear a lot is that he's too loyal to his coaches. He's too loyal to his coordinators and allows them to stick around too long when they deserve to be fired. And it's, they're talking about from, way back with Cam Cameron and how they felt he should have been let go earlier. And then, of course, once he was let go, the Ravens did go on that run and went to a Super Bowl. So it gave some ammunition to those fans. And they continue to talk about that when they're referencing Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, say he's got too long of a leash. He should have been gone after this pathetic passing season that they've had. He doesn't, but, don't get me started on defending why the Ravens kept Greg Roman. I mean, the offense has scored more points than any team in the league over the last 2 seasons. And that is the single most important job of any offensive coordinator is to put points on the board. And they do that better than anyone. And then you flip it over and you talk about the defensive side of the ball. Now, he doesn't get much. You won't hear a ton of criticism about Wink Martindale, but let me just explain how good he's been. I mean, since 2018, Baltimore has led the league in points allowed per game with 18.2, yards allowed per game with 307. They've scored more defensive touchdowns than anyone in the league with 12.
I feel like it's not even close for some reason. I feel like we score a ton of defensive touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think they currently also have the record of consecutive games forcing at least one turnover, somewhere in the 20s, if I remember off the top of my head. And also opponent completion percentage is 60%, which is number one also in the league. So if your defensive coordinator holds the offenses to the least amount of points over 2 years, and your offensive coordinator scores more points than any team in the league. I mean, that's just saying something about the leadership that John Harbaugh is bringing. And, so the fact that he is loyal to his coaches, loyal to his players, especially veterans, I think is a huge plus. Because if you look around the league and you look at teams that are successful, a lot of times continuity is the common denominator between all those teams. Is teams that have had longstanding head coaches, longstanding veteran players throughout the team, and mainly at those key positions. So yeah, I mean, I've always been a big John Harbaugh guy. I think the knocks on him about not knowing offense and defense is absolutely insane. This is a guy who's been a head coach and for now 13 years for the Ravens, and started with the Eagles in '98 when he got his first job as a special teams coordinator under Andy Reid. And he held that position for 8 years and then moved to the secondary in 2007 before coming over here. So the guy has been in football for so long. He knows, there's nothing he's not aware of in the game of football. This guy has done it all, seen it all, and is still heavily involved in the offense and defensive construction of the Ravens playbooks.
Yeah, one of the things I think is important before we get into the rest of things on this list is that, I draw a comparison between, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, own their own business, or a lot of people do things like that, right? So if a guy's a mechanic, he says, you know what, I'm not going to work for someone else. I go start my own car garage. And then, he theoretically becomes a successful owner of a shop, right? But it's not as successful as people think, because what happens a lot of times is that these guys know how to be mechanics, but they don't know how to be business owners, right? They work in the business, not on the business. And that's how I see John, right? John knows how to work on the business that is bringing this team to as many victories as possible, right? And not just working in it. That's why I think John is so skilled. Look, Belichick has tried to be the GM for the Patriots, and geez, I think it was I think you said it was like 2013 or something crazy like that. The last time he drafted a Pro Bowler in the first round or something insane like that. I mean, it's now John's obviously not the GM, but my point is that it's really hard to do, to be that type of a leader and have that type of foresight and vision to, like I said, work on the business, not in it. That is bringing us as many victories as possible. So I think John is in rare air that way, and I give him a lot of credit for that. But yeah, there's certainly some surprises on this list. Like Glenn said, it's only top 7. Let's talk about the other ones.
Yeah. So Matt LaFleur from the Green Bay Packers comes in at number 3, 1 year after leading the Green Bay Packers to a phenomenal season. I mean, he had the MVP at quarterback, and got to the NFC Championship. Losing out to the eventual champion. So shocking in the sense that he doesn't have a huge resume, but the small resume he does have is quite impressive. And some would say, well, isn't that more credit to Aaron Rodgers and the fact that he's got a Hall of Fame quarterback who's playing better now than he ever has? Or some people are saying, well, Matt LaFleur came in and took a Hall of Fame quarterback and made him play his best season of his career in year, I'm not sure what year he's in, but it's certainly up there.
I think 16 he just finished.
Crazy. So what do you think when you see Matt LaFleur? Do you think it's deserving? Do you think it's a little high for him at this point in his career?
Yeah, I think it's a little high. I don't think it's deserving, because that's like giving Blatt. Remember Blatt wasn't that the coach of the I might be disrespecting LaFleur a little bit, right? but my point is that, like, you got LeBron James, you're always going to be the conversation for coach of the year. You got Aaron Rodgers, you're always going to be in the coach for conversation here. That makes life a lot easier. So yeah, I think it's a little high. I actually like McDermott, who's 4th, better than LaFleur, because I think McDermott, where LaFleur I think has kind of stepped into a situation, McDermott has done a lot more to bring that roster, develop the internal players, and know how to pull the right strings to get the most out of his coaches and players to bring the Bills back to relevancy. I mean, teams hated going to Buffalo because they were going to spank them because they weren't a good team, but they had to go up in the cold. Like, now they're a relevant scare. I mean, obviously they beat us, right?
Legit Super Bowl contender. Yeah.
Right. And that to me speaks a lot more about him than what LaFleur has done in Green Bay. But I'll tell you this, Glenn, and I'll kick it back to you here, but I'll take Sean Payton any day over McDermott and LaFleur. That's just me. I think he's such a player coach. He's able to think outside the box. He's so creative. I think he finds ways to make every one of the guys on his offense successful. I think he gives his defense enough room to breathe. And obviously, once again, you can make the same argument that he had a Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe one of the best of all time, at least statistically speaking. But he's done it for so long, and it's that offense has changed as Drew changed physically, right?
Yeah.
And so I like Peyton over both of those guys. But what's your take on 4 and 5?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think McDermott, I'm very impressed with what he's done in Buffalo. I think you're right. He's got a big hand in building the Buffalo Bills back into a contender, into relevancy, really. And I agree, Matt LaFleur kind of came into an already relevant franchise with a Hall of Fame quarterback. So a little more credit to them. But either way, still pretty surprised to see those two names ahead of some other names on this list, and also ahead of some names not found on this list. So, yeah, Sean Payton, I think, is phenomenal. I think he really showed that even with Drew Brees missing that significant time, that he was able to win without him, and with some guys that a lot of people, I mean, nobody wanted Jameis Winston, and most people around the league, I think, look at, especially when they took Taysom Hill, as like, what are you guys doing? What are you going to play? Where are you going to play this kid? So, yeah, big credit goes to him and finding a way to turn Taysom Hill into just one of those crazy weapons that you see around the league that are pretty rare to find. So, and let's see what he does this year, because this year might be his most impressive moves. If he can turn Jameis Winston into a guy who can protect the ball, we already know he can throw the ball all over the field and make a ton of yards and throw for a ton of touchdowns. If he can bring those interceptions down, then it might be his best coaching job yet. Now, number 6 comes in Bill Belichick. I think most were expecting to see Bill higher on this list, but I think this list is really talking about heading into 2021. And when, while they made a ton of additions, I mean, they were probably the single most active team in the league in free agency, bringing a bunch of guys in on both sides of the ball, and also returning the most COVID opt-outs from last season as well. So definitely a lot of changeover in this roster. Expect them to be a lot better than they were last year, but it's still a lot of wait and see. Cam Newton is now injured and missing some time in practice. Does that give the opening to Mac Jones to slide in there as an early starter? Or, and how do they balance the fact that they have two quarterbacks with two completely different skill sets? And how do you build an offense that can suit both of them when most expect Mac Jones to eventually take over as a starter? And I guess this injury could accelerate the process. But surprised to see Bill Belichick there at number 6 and not getting more love. But if you ask me, Jimbo, I mean, I'm a little different. I think bump him down even lower, because he was getting carried by the GOAT for all these years. And I just hope Bill stays there. I've been saying this for years. I hope Bill stays around long enough
to be exposed
for the average coach that he is. But I know I'm going to get killed for that, and I'm unique in my thoughts there. But look, all I know is year 1, I looked pretty darn smart.
Yeah, it was a little bit of this, right? We had a couple calls where, when they were going a 3-game win streak, I'm like,
I don't remember those calls.
Oh, right, of course. But you're right. You did come out smelling pretty good after that. But I will say, in Bill's defense, not that I'm a defender of Bill Belichick, but I think we can think of instances where every one of the coaches above him, he's put him in timeout for sure. From a defensive perspective, right? Yeah, I think we can, and certainly, he's done so to a lot of those coaches, in previous, and I think his record with Andy Reid is pretty well, on his side. Now, like you said, when you got the greatest quarterback of all time, but the one I want to talk about here, I mean, I think Bill respectively should be a little higher, but I think the reason he's at 6 is kind of a wait and see. This year, it's a lot of pressure on Bill Belichick to get it right, and I hope Cam Newton is right, because just like you're low on Bill, I'm one of the rare people that is really high on Cam having a big year this year. I think this could be his last big year of his career. And I think they got the tools to do it. But anyway, Stefanski, number 7, obviously, and I think this has a lot to do with the fact that it was the Browns, right? And he took them out of the basement into to relevancy, like I said previous. And look, he improved their offense, but he really stabilized that team. He was a steady hand, right? He brought true leadership to it, experienced leadership. and did a great job. But with Stefanski being on this list, Glenn, one that you and I are both surprised that's not on the list. So I'm okay with Stefanski being here, but Mike Tomlin, not a top 7 coach.
Yeah.
What's your take there? Do you think he should have been there?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's to me, it's ridiculous, and we're obviously not Steeler fans here, but respect is, where it's due. I think is what needs to be said here. This guy has never had a losing season in his tenure as the Steelers coach. Has a Super Bowl victory under his belt. I mean, what more can you do? This guy led a team with Duck Hodges at quarterback and Mason Rudolph to an 8-8 record and barely missed the playoffs, and could have very easily went 9-7 had they pulled out, a late season win. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think Stefanski did a fantastic job. I mean, the fact that they won 12 games, including a playoff game, is absolutely insane. Now, as I think, was it Wink Martindale pointed out, they took a lot of losing to get that roster together. Okay. That took a lot of years of losing, getting top 10 pick after top 10 pick to build this stud roster. So he is fortunate in that he did come into a situation,
arguably a top 3 roster in the NFL on paper, right?
Roster wise, phenomenal. And he has benefited from having Andrew Berry at GM, who's, while was unknown and unproven before, certainly showing himself as being a very competent GM now that he's taken over. And so I think he came into a pretty good situation. It sounds weird because it's the Browns and they invented losing. And so the fact that you're saying that they came into a good situation doesn't really sound right, but man, you can't really find a weakness on that roster. So he's got a really good team. So let's see what he does once he starts what's he going to do with Baker? Let's see what that happens. But respect goes to Kevin. But the fact that Tomlin is not on this list, and Matt LaFleur, who's in his second year, or now in his third year, Kevin Stefanski going into his second year, and Sean McDermott going into what? I mean, he hasn't been around too long. Mike Tomlin should have been on this list. And I understand that some are doubting whether the Steelers are going to be competitive this year as far as competing for, AFC, coming out of the AFC with their offensive line. To me, they still got some really good weapons. They still got a Hall of Fame quarterback in Big Ben while definitely nearing the end of his career. And they still got some amazing defensive players that I think are going to be, again, it's going to be one of the top defenses in the league and probably lead the league in sacks again, like they have for 3 straight seasons. So to not put him on this list is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And like you said, we're not Steelers fans here, but certainly think that Tomlin should have been on this list. But Glenn, this is how I want to end this video.
Mm-hmm.
I told you about the Monsters U guy. I just want to show the rest of the world because this is Andy Reid. All right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can see it.
Andy Reid.
I can definitely see it
all day, baby.
We got to get him a face shield that's fogged up, and then it'll definitely be Andy Reid. Yeah, I see it.
Oh, good old Andy. Love him to death. But certainly want to know what your guys' thoughts are. John, number 2. We think that's I think Glenn and I agree with the list in that John should be number 2, but we know there's going to be a lot of you guys.
Also, where's Pete Carroll? Just want to throw that out there. No Pete Carroll on this list. Not a ton of Super Bowl winning coaches still coaching out there. So the fact that you're talking about 2 not on this list, but yet Matt LaFleur, Sean McDermott, and Stefanski are a little odd.
Yeah. But let us know your thoughts. Where do you see, like Glenn said, who was left off? And then, where do you see John? Because I think a lot of you guys might rate him lower. Let us know why. Be prepared for a rebuttal. Mm-hmm. But we look forward to your comments, and we'll talk to you guys soon.